Hey everyone, thanks for being here on time today. We'll get started here in just a second. Awesome. A few more people are still joining. We'll get started here in just a few minutes, folks. Thanks for being on time. Awesome. Great. Thanks again, everyone, for being here. It looks like we still got a ton of people still joining. We'll start here in about 30 seconds. Awesome. Great. Well, we're going to jump right in. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. We got a full agenda and really looking forward to the topic today. Before we get started, I'd love to hear where everyone's from in the chat. Just throw up your location. I always love to hear about where everyone's tuning in from. Looks like we got from India, Astoria, Oregon, USA, Pinnacle. We got Phoenix, Arizona. We got OC, California, Florida, Idaho, Iowa, Michigan, Washington, Michigan, Arizona, California, Pittsburgh. Awesome. Cool. Looks like we got a great people all around the country. So great. Well, thanks for everyone for being here. Awesome. Virginia Beach, New York, Phoenix, New Mexico. Awesome. Well, great. Well, if you're here today, the discussion is really going to be all around Microsoft 365. And there's really two main pain points. This is actually the fourth time we've done this presentation in the past couple of months, just because every time we get hundreds of people participating and there is a lot of challenges around Microsoft 365, but then also a lot of benefits. So it's kind of the two main drivers. If you're experiencing like, hey, I want to use Microsoft 365 more fully, this presentation and this webinar is for you. Or if you're just having issues with it, you don't really understand where all the different pieces go and all the full capabilities, this webinar is also for you. So really excited about it. Before we jump in, a brief introduction about me. And my name is Taylor Wells. I work for NW Techs. We're a Microsoft partner and reseller. So we work with clients all around the country, helping them with Microsoft 365, utilizing it, understanding how it connects with the rest of their technology stack, and also just helping them use it, the best practices, migrating to it, all that fun stuff, the full suite, even in regards to Azure and helping our clients with virtual servers. We do these webinars regularly. So check out our website, nwtex.com/webinars. And we have this subject, but then also a host of other topics, everything from cybersecurity to compliance to phone systems. We really help our clients manage all of their technology in addition to Microsoft 365. So the agenda, we have a full agenda today. So before we jump into it, kind of giving you a roadmap for the next 45 minutes to an hour. The next, we're gonna have about six, seven different sections going through different pieces of Microsoft 365, doing some comparisons, doing some deep dives into SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, Azure, security and compliance, and then we'll wrap at the end with the Q&A. And we've gotten probably 400 Q&A questions submitted. So thank you for everyone for submitting questions in advance. Super helpful for understanding what you're looking to solve, what you're looking to learn in these presentations. But if things come up, please submit them. We have the Q&A section. If you are in the Zoom, you can click on the Q&A section in the middle and just submit your questions through the Q&A as we go through this, and we'll try to answer all those towards the end in the Q&A section. So great, let's jump into the first section here. And it's really on, when you're looking at Microsoft 365, why Microsoft 365 Cloud, and then why the cloud in general, really. And if you're evaluating whether to keep your on-prem infrastructure or move everything to the cloud. And the cloud really is obviously a very nebulous and vague term, and it can mean a lot of things. But essentially, it's the idea of moving away from on-premise infrastructures and moving things into the cloud to be managed there. And Microsoft's offering has multiple facets, which we're going to go through today, like I just mentioned. But it's kind of understanding it from a high-level overview. What is the differences and what are the benefits? The first thing I want to highlight here is 80% of the Fortune 500 companies are in the cloud or use specifically the Microsoft 365 cloud. So this could be Microsoft 365. It could be Microsoft Azure. It could be a lot, or there are other cloud products. And so you can rely on a couple of aspects. First, a lot of times we have this emotional connection with keeping our data or infrastructures local. And really, especially if you're a small company and you're, 10 employees to 100 employees, or you're a couple hundred employees max, having things stored locally or having infrastructures in a local standpoint really doesn't make sense. And even enterprise companies, we're seeing here, even enterprise companies are moving their infrastructures to the cloud, because from scalability to security to cost, there's just a ton of benefits from it. So you can have confidence that you are doing things that are very traditional in this, or very common now, to move your infrastructures to the cloud. And even a vast majority of the Fortune 500 companies are doing it. A couple of things to note here are improvements in security and compliance, kind of like what I was hinting at earlier, in regards to the ability to really have a more enterprise level approach to your security, especially if you are a small business or a medium-sized business. The cloud has a lot more to offer in regards to security, and keeping your servers patched and updated, or your local equipment updated and secure, is exponentially harder and more costly than trying to keep the cloud secure. And when it comes to your standpoint and your cost and everything you're involved. And what we have found is ultimately you can have a lot more security measures in place in the cloud that are harder to implement, not impossible to implement on a low level, or on a server level or in a network level, but just ultimately harder. So your ability to get compliant, your ability to improve security is just easier in the cloud. So rest assured there as well. Also, reduce cost. Having a server, if you're a small to medium-sized business and you've done this for a while and you've probably realized that your servers are one of the most costly and challenging things to maintain in your organization. So just from a pure cost standpoint, if you move your infrastructure to the cloud, right? If you get rid of servers, you don't have that upfront cost of having to purchasing the server, which you have to do every 5 to 10 years, right? Which could be, $5,000 to $10,000 just in that, let alone all the maintenance costs that your IT departments or your IT vendor is doing to maintain that server. And then everything else in addition to that, having the licensing and the patching and the backups, everything is is so much more costly when it comes to having on-premise equipment. And if you can move your infrastructure to the cloud, it can be super helpful. And really nowadays, there's nothing, I've been with the company for about 5 years, and I've seen a lot of different scenarios, especially for the small businesses. There's really no scenario I've seen where a company that's under a couple hundred employees needs to keep on-premise servers, or really on-premise anything. You can move all your files, all your software, all your hardware to the cloud. And majority of that can be used, from what I've seen, through the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. So really cool. Ultimately, the big picture is, hey, you can move all of your infrastructure to the cloud and not have to be reliant on local equipment. Things like, just reliability. So kind of the other thing too, just having reliable infrastructure, which it also reduces cost, is if you have the power goes out, your internet goes out, or you have a fire, anything that happens locally is obviously not affected in the cloud. So if you've ever experienced that, right, where your internet goes out and your whole infrastructure goes down, your email goes down, or you can't access your files, or you can't access QuickBooks, or you can't access your software, super problematic and not acceptable when you have mission critical infrastructure, right? Like file storage or software or email, things like that. So another really important factor to consider when looking at the cloud versus on-premise. Also simplifies IT management. Like I mentioned before, servers in general, storing things locally in general is one of the most challenging things from an IT standpoint, especially servers. And then last but not least, it promotes agility and keeps you current. Once again, you're not having to refresh those servers every 5 years or so. You're able to scale easily with the cloud, either add on more cloud or reduce users or subscriptions, right? Really easily, versus trying to, set up a new server can be much more challenging. So lots of benefits to the cloud, and the downsides are few and far between. Happy if you do have questions around, hey, what are the downsides of the cloud? Please submit those questions in the Q&A. We're happy to address those as well if you want to dive more into that as well. Awesome. Let's move to the next section, which is kind of reiterating all those things we were just talking about in regards to the cloud. But really the next part here I want to jump into is the comparison of Microsoft 365 to Google Workspace. This is something that comes up a lot, a question that comes up a lot, which is really what are the differences? And if I, as a business or an organization, how should I evaluate whether I should go with Microsoft or Google? They're the prominent players when it comes to things like email, file storage, are probably the two main aspects, but then also their collaboration tools like video conferencing or instant message, stuff like that as well. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, some of the benefits of Microsoft 365 are security. What we have found is Microsoft has just been kind of one step ahead when it comes to enabling you to put in a lot of security measures in your Microsoft 365 environment. And so locking things down, making sure things are secure has been easier, and we've definitely pushed our clients towards that for that exact reason. Also, Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is a phenomenal collaboration, which we'll talk about today, and is really one of the leaders when it comes to team collaboration. And so tapping into that and having that a part of the ecosystem is also super powerful. We'll talk about more of that as well today. And then also compliance, ultimately demonstrating compliance. And this is really around if you're in a highly regulated organization or industry, things like dealing with a lot of sensitive data, law firms, financial firms, healthcare, even nonprofits, a lot of nonprofits, financial firms, they all deal with a lot of sensitive data, or you deal with a lot of sensitive data. So demonstrating compliance is not only about having security in place, but it's also about demonstrating compliance, right? And so Microsoft 365 environment has just been easier for that. So if you're in one of those highly regulated industries, we've helped our clients that are in those industries utilize the ecosystem when it comes to compliance, and it's been super great and helpful. The one plus to the Google environment versus Microsoft is really the ease of setup and management. Ultimately, Microsoft 365 can be a little cumbersome. And if you don't have a partner or a reseller, somebody like us that can help you navigate what you should have in place, how to best utilize it, then it can be problematic to set up. So honestly, I actually really love Google products in general. They have some, their email product is great. And even the Google Drive, we do have some clients that use Google Drive and find it a benefit. They don't necessarily see the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, but it's probably 80-20 or 70-30 where the majority of our clients are using the 365 ecosystem because of all these reasons. And we're able to help them do that. That being said, Google, we're actually a Google partner as well. And so we help our clients with Google products as well, like Gmail and Drive and all that fun stuff. So I'm happy to help there as well. But generally speaking, for these reasons here, people are standardizing from a client standpoint, especially the highly regulated industries, right? Security and compliance are those two pieces that are a huge driver. Obviously, Teams is as well, and most industries can benefit from Teams. But if you're in that highly regulated industry, security and compliance is huge for that. Awesome. Let's move to the next section, which is some name changes. Microsoft 365 has moved from Office 365, which was that product you would buy that gave you a license to the software of Office, Outlook and Excel and Word and all that fun stuff. And it's actually they've moved to the Microsoft 365 name, which is really they're going to be including more features in the subscription. So if you're paying for the Office subscription, you're going to be paying the same amount. But they're switching names around, and they're really trying to become a more comprehensive subscription where they're going to be providing more things around endpoint management and really being involved in your whole tech stack. And then in that, SharePoint's a big part of this Microsoft license, and really there's ultimately the biggest part of this is we're going to dive kind of into the file storage aspect now. And file storage, you can do a lot of things in the 365 ecosystem when it comes to file storage, but SharePoint and OneDrive are the two main tools that you can use to store files. And so there's a lot of confusion around these tools. And I'm going to be diving deep into kind of the differences of the tools and what you can use them for now and what we've used them for, what we've helped our clients use them for. But really, SharePoint is focused on really the internal internet of your company. So whether it comes to documentation, collaboration, kind of a company calendar, access to critical websites, surveys and votings for internal, some business process automation. But really, it's all about internal documentation, internal collaboration, internal communication when it comes to files and events and things like that. And so we found, and we use it for that internally. So for things that are specifically internal use, we've used SharePoint for. It can do external, right? If you want to collaborate with people externally, but it seems to be not as quite intuitive as OneDrive when it comes to sharing permissions. And there's some technical challenges with doing that. So we have found that SharePoint is great for internal documents and storage. The minute you want to start collaborating with people outside your organization, OneDrive becomes much better for that. So that's kind of the delineation we found so far. And we'll talk about OneDrive here in a second. But SharePoint really is focused on kind of internal documents, processes, information, storage. And an example here is actually one of our partners, Pax8, and they are, this is how they use it, right? So they have internal assets. They have their employee university, right? Their employee curriculum or courses. And it's really all around, having things, storing information for your team or your company internally to document and to collaborate on. And Teams kind of works in conjunction with this as well, because a lot of internal communication happens in Teams. So files and things like that can be stored in SharePoint, and then also collaborated with in Teams, which is also super cool. And so you can have that seamless integration there. OneDrive is the kind of the other sibling in the file storage, or the main usage, of it is for file storage. And it can really be used specifically for external communication, or really your personal documents. So nothing that's company owned, or that you want to collaborate with externally. So you can do a lot with OneDrive, and it can really be, we've seen our clients use it to be a central hub for sharing documents with their clients back and forth. So it really gives you the ability to create a portal where your clients or people outside of your organization can then access documents, upload documents, but then they can also download documents, right? So they can upload documents to you. Let's say you're a CPA and you have tax preparer, documents that you want your client to upload to you, like W-2s or whatever. Then they can upload that to the file, and then you can also put files in there so they can download it as well. So you can have that two-way synchronous. And we've seen OneDrive is best for this, for external communication, and does this really well. SharePoint has the ability to do this, the two-way communication with people outside your organization, but it's not really designed for it. OneDrive does it much better. So if you're trying to, for example, if you're using Citrix ShareFile, or if you're using Google Drive, or if you're using Dropbox or Box, those are all very similar tools to what OneDrive can do for you when it comes to collaborating over documents. And the coolest part about OneDrive, and even SharePoint, is that all of the Office products like Excel and Word and PowerPoint are all native. So as you're editing them in the cloud, you're going to get the best experience, especially for those Microsoft documents like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And so if you're doing a lot of those documents in the cloud and you're collaborating with people in your team or externally, it works really well. It's better than any other platform when it comes to specifically Word, Excel, PowerPoint documents, the kind of the Office suite, traditional suite of type of documents you're working on. And then, like I mentioned, there's a lot of ways to share it externally. So when it comes to external sharing, this is actually a screenshot of how we use it to externally share with clients and or people outside of our organization. And ultimately, it gives you, and also side note here, great questions coming in the chat. I'm going to make sure we definitely save time at the end to answer all these questions. So I love them all. The great questions that are coming in. So keep them coming. But ultimately, kind of when it comes to the power of OneDrive and using it to share documents externally, you get a bunch of different ways you can share this document. You can share it with a link. You can share it specifically with individuals in your company or a specific email address that it gets sent to them. You can add a password. The end goal, no matter what you're doing from a file storage standpoint, the end goal should be, especially if you're sharing documents two ways, right? You're sharing documents with clients and clients are sharing documents with you that are sensitive. You should have some sort of portal that they have to log in and authenticate themselves with a password and even multi-factor authentication on top of that, which we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But that's the ideal. That's the gold standard. So if you're sharing, once again, this is actually the most important, one of the most important parts of this webinar is when you're sharing documents, sending things by email is really ultimately not secure, especially sensitive documents, right? You're sending sensitive information by email is not secure. Even if you have encryption enabled on your end and you're sending encrypted emails to your clients, the chances of them turning around and sending you a document that has sensitive information is very high, especially if you're in a regulated industry, right? Financial, legal, medical, or healthcare, and law firms, things like that. Anyone that deals with sensitive information is generally going to have two-way synchronous file sharing. So you need to have secure file sharing where your client or your vendor is uploading and downloading documents in a secure portal that they have to log into. Citrix ShareFile does this. Microsoft OneDrive does this well. And those are probably the two recommendations I would give right here for file storage. And OneDrive does this super well as well. This is probably one of the best features and the ability to create secure sharing with your clients when it comes to the cloud. And if you're using on-premise technology that is ultimately you're not sharing things in the cloud and you're using a server, you're missing out on this ability to have secure file sharing with your clients. And sending things by email, like I mentioned before, is really not a best practice. And the best way to do it is to have some sort of secure portal or vault, like OneDrive can facilitate. Citrix ShareFile is also a great provider that can facilitate that as well. So awesome. So that's really important. Didn't want to dive too deep into that, but super important aspect of file storage and in file sharing is that you have that. If you just send somebody a link, or if you just attach it in an email, a little fun fact is that email, if it goes to a bunch of different servers all around the world, the email is not point-to-point encrypted completely. If that email were to get compromised along the way, then obviously that information could be exposed. So having that secure file sharing is super important. In addition to all the awesome benefits of collaborating in the cloud, you get that synchronous, where you can work on documents at the same time with somebody else, that synchronous collaboration. You get different multiple revisionings where you can go back and you can see revisionings. You can have commenting and an interaction with other people on these documents. There's a lot of cool benefits of having your files in the cloud, in addition to the ability to have securely share it back and forth when it comes to sensitive information. Awesome. I want a side note as well in the chat. We're going to put a way for you to connect with us if you are interested in learning how to leverage Microsoft 365 more. So head over to nwtex.com/Microsoft 365. You can book a free 30-minute consultation with us right now, where we'll talk through your specific organization's needs and how you can potentially leverage the cloud and Microsoft 365 more fully in your particular situation. Awesome. We're going to switch now over to Microsoft Teams. And Microsoft Teams and team collaboration platforms like Teams or Slack are kind of a newer technology. Really, the past 5 years, they've become very popular. 5 to 10 years have become very popular. And especially since the pandemic, have become mission critical for a lot of organizations, especially remote organizations or organizations that are working in a hybrid environment or working in cloud-based. And so Teams and Microsoft Teams in general, these collaboration tools are kind of in this interesting mix of they are trying to facilitate internal communication quickly, right? So you have instant messenger where you can message somebody. It's great because since it is instant, it's like, going and interrupting somebody in their office, right? Where you may not want to send a text message or call them or email them. you want to be very much in their face and ultimately get their attention. So Teams does this really well, or these team collaboration platforms like Teams or Slack do this really well, where you can send a message without having to interrupt somebody completely, right? If they're in a meeting or if they're away from their desk, you can send them a quick message that's important, but it's not a text, right? Because the text is hard to track. Email is not really that urgent, and phone is very urgent, right? Phone is you're going to interrupt somebody. So Teams is pretty cool when it comes to the ability to have that instant communication, and it can do so much. Not only does it have the ability to have internal communication where you can have different channels and boards, or you can internally communicate on different stuff, or one-on-one or in small groups, right? Where you just want to talk to a couple people, but you can also hold meetings externally, which I know there's probably some questions around why aren't we using Teams right now to host those webinar, because it actually can do webinars and meetings and stuff like that, which we'll definitely get to that. So it kind of is the combination of Slack and Zoom. So if you're using, like, we have a lot of people that move from Gmail, Slack, and Zoom, which is their email. It's Slack is for the team collaboration and instant messaging and things like that. And then Zoom is for video conferencing. And they all move to Teams because Teams can do all three of those things. It can do the instant messaging like Slack and the team collaboration stuff. It can do the meetings, right, like Zoom. And then it can also do ultimately, Teams, instant messaging, video conferencing, and email, and because obviously Outlook and stuff like that in Microsoft 365. So they move all three of those applications over to Microsoft 365 in addition to the file storage. So really there's 4, but Teams can do a lot of this, where honestly, we've used Teams. We used to use Slack, and we used to be a Google shop internally, and had our clients. A couple of years ago, we moved completely over to Microsoft 365, and I don't call my team members. I don't email them very often. I don't text them ever. Everything goes through Teams. So it's really the central hub for all of our communication. And it's really the central hub for the majority of our client communication. We use Teams, and it's interesting because I come across organizations and I guess we're guilty of this as well, is using Teams and Zoom, right? Or using them because of the applicability of it, or depending on the needs, or there's lots of different reasons. But in our situation is we actually do Teams for the majority of all our communication with our clients, externally and internally. So any communication internally with our team and externally with our clients, all of our virtual meetings are held in Teams. But we actually still use a phone system, a traditional phone system for phone calls, because phone calls are still needed. Zoom's phone feature is lacking. So we actually still use a traditional VoIP phone system. Internally, we help our clients with that as well. And then the reason why we're using Zoom right now is Zoom's webinar feature is a little bit more advanced than ultimately Microsoft Teams webinar feature. Hopefully one day it gets to that place where it is as good, but ultimately Teams is a little bit superior. Zoom is a little bit superior when it comes to that. And Zoom is a little bit more accessible. So once we have a client and we're working with somebody, and when we know they use Microsoft Teams, then we generally do all of our meetings over Microsoft Teams. But really it's only the marketing when it comes to Zoom. For using webinars, do we use Zoom? Almost everything else is exclusively used through Teams. Kind of some of the benefits. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on here. A lot of you know Teams or are using it, but here's kind of high level benefits. You save a lot of time and information sharing, because you're able to share information quickly. You have an 18% improvement in time decision made. Something so interesting about Teams and the ability in the remote or hybrid environment is the ability to record meetings. And you can do this in Zoom, obviously, and other platforms as well. But it's really cool, the ability to record meetings. And like, as we hire people remotely, we're able to record all the meetings and then share them with other people in the team. And it was amazing. We were able to have our first interview with somebody on a Thursday and have a job offer by Friday afternoon, because we were able to share information so quickly. And really cool use case of being able to record meetings and have that instant communication with everyone across the board. And 88% survey response, having all of the information in one place, save time. Awesome. 18%, 19% reduction in meetings every week, because you can just send quick messages. You don't have to have a meeting around something. save time in traveling, and save time in overnight trips. Awesome. Some of the cool features around Teams I want to highlight today is the search function. You're able to search individual conversations with people, search files. A couple other things too. You're able to tag, do a lot of cool tagging. A couple of the features. I'm going to go through these quickly because there's a lot of them, and we'll definitely send out this deck of slides afterwards, or if you have specific questions, we can answer them for you. Recent view, you're able to see recent conversations, so you can see what's important and really have having that connection with your team, and making sure you respond to issues quickly, right, with your team members. File sharing, you can do SharePoint and OneDrive integrations into Teams, so you can have bring up files in a meeting in Teams, right? Bring up an Excel document or a Word document or a PowerPoint in a meeting in Teams, or share one in a chat and get feedback from people quickly. Super cool feature. There's tons of apps as well. So Teams has grown exponentially in the past couple of years. And so integrating your project manager or integrating your phone system, lots of different things you can do to integrate with Microsoft Teams. Cool. Some of the features you should also be mindful of, and the things you should enable when it comes to the different sections. So Teams, once again, I love Microsoft 365, but they definitely have feature overload when it comes to the things you can do and how to set everything up. SharePoint's no exception, OneDrive's no exception, and Teams is definitely no exception. But here's just some of the things you should keep in mind when setting up your Teams, the things you should enable. That way you get the full features. Here's kind of some of the chat features: direct messages, group chats, rename chats. These are all kind of in your admin panel that you can make sure you set up. Pin chats, all that fun stuff. Collaboration, team sites, channels, file storage, third-party integrations, emojis, things like that kind of help improve culture and lighten things up, especially when the situation arises. And then calling as well. So you have the ability to make calls. You can actually do like a conference line, right, where you can make outbound call to somebody. And you can also do inbound calls, right? Or have the ability to do calls internally with your team. Once again, like I mentioned, the outbound and having it being a robust phone system really isn't there yet. We'd love it to be, and we'd love if the Microsoft Teams voice solutions were there, but they really aren't a complete business class phone system, which most of our clients want and or need. And so really the phone features, the call features are left to calling your team internally, right? You can call them. You don't have to do a video chat every time. You can just call them. And you can also set up conference bridges as well, where people can call in, or you can have a number of people can call in, which is basically a video conference call without the video, right? Where people are just calling in. Similar, Zoom has that feature as well, where people can just call in. Awesome. Some other features here as well is when you get into a meeting, as you'll see on my screen, you'll be able to, there's this bar up top, and there's these three dots. I'm going to kind of go through some of these dots here. But the first thing before we do that is the raise hand feature. This is a great feature. You can do it in Zoom as well, but a great feature to make sure you're able to interrupt correctly. And it's kind of hard to do that virtually. So the raise hand feature is really cool. Under these three dots here in the Teams feature, there's a couple different things here I want to highlight. The gallery section here, you can select different modes, which is really cool. They have a couple different modes for how to view your team when you're having a video conference or when you're having a team meeting. The first one is together mode, which is a little overwhelming with this many people. But if you have 20 or 15 people, it's actually pretty cool to have everyone behind a chair. You kind of eliminate their background, and you don't have to deal with seeing that. And then this is also another mode here, which is presenter mode or gallery mode, where you're able to see kind of the presenter and then a few other members as well. And this is also presenter mode or gallery mode with somebody presenting a deck, right? So you can see a couple other people's videos and then see their deck. I think my favorite out of them all, I really do like together mode. I think it's pretty cool, pretty unique to the Teams video conferencing feature. And the regular presenter mode is also great too. Those are the different options though, depending on how many people are in your meeting, depending on what's going on. And then they obviously have the large gallery, which is like up to 50 people, which honestly is too much for me. I think seeing the person that's presenting this video is great, but seeing everyone's video is pretty distracting. So I really appreciate the simplistic option here, and even together mode, where it just simplifies, because video conferencing, let's be honest, can be pretty overwhelming, especially if you're doing it a lot or if there's a lot of people. Another cool feature as well is the meeting details. So you're able to, if you click on this, you're able to actually pull up the meeting invite. So if you're like, oh, we forgot to invite somebody, or we wanted to add another person to the invite, you can just click on that and copy the info and then send them in a text or an email and get that invite out. Another really cool feature is incoming video. So I haven't seen any other video collaboration platform do this, where you can actually turn off your incoming video. So if you're having internet problems, or you're on the road, or you're traveling and you're having internet problems, and you want to turn off the video, so you can not only turn off your video, which is super helpful for just internet connection issues, right, where it's staticky and you're trying to present, but you also can turn off the incoming video. So everyone's videos gets turned off and it's just audio. Honestly, I wish some of our meetings was like this, because I think video is a little overwhelming. And the audio is perfectly fine. But especially if you're having internet issues, right, or somebody's having internet issues, just turn off your incoming and your outbound video, and that will solve the issue. Awesome. Before we jump into the next section, once again, if you want additional help with leveraging Microsoft 365, head over to our website. The link is in the chat, and you can schedule a time to talk about leveraging all this. Let's talk about Microsoft Azure. So this is actually a pretty cool and really interesting area of the 365 world, and really the Microsoft cloud world, is everything. And honestly, half of this stuff is above my pay grade. There's a lot here that gets complex, and it can do a lot. And we need engineers that can help us implement a lot of these tools. But some really cool things here for Azure are really around, I want to highlight a couple of them. Virtual machines. So especially for clients that deal with a lot of different types of software. So we have some accounting firms and CPA firms that use 5 or 6 different tax softwares, different versions of them, different bookkeeping softwares, because all their clients use different versions. And so having a server that hosts all that can be really challenging. So these virtual desktops is actually where nothing lives locally. You have nothing on a local machine. When you type in your password and log in, you're actually logging into the cloud. And so this is like next level cloud. This is like, there's cloud such as storing your files and your email and team collaborations and Zoom and your CRM and all that fun stuff in the cloud. And the next level of the cloud is really the virtual machines, where you actually don't have no local programs, you don't have any local files, you don't have anything stored locally. When you log into your computer, you're actually logging into the cloud, and ultimately accessing all your information there. So this gets a little bit complex, and I don't want to get in the weeds too much here, but a lot of cool features there for simplifying your environment, making it more stable, more secure, more compliant. Lots of cool stuff there. It also does a lot of your network. So if your servers, on-premise servers right now, are your network, right? So it's doing your Active Directory and is your domain controller and things like that. Then Azure, the cloud, Microsoft's cloud, can also do a lot of that. And so really what the Azure is the ability to have cloud servers. So, and I'm going to use that as a term in talking about the rest of Azure, is the ability to really have cloud servers, and that goes one step further. So instead of just getting rid of your server, so a lot of clients out there, you may have a particular piece of software that has to live on a server. It can't be, there's no cloud version of it, right? Where you go to a website and access it. You actually have to access it on a server. So this is where Azure can come in. And not only can do cool things like virtual desktops or be your network, it also can be your cloud servers. So you can move QuickBooks Desktop, right? If you use QuickBooks Desktop and not QuickBooks Online, you have to have it either on a local workstation, or have it on a server, or have it in a cloud server through Azure. So there's a lot of cool stuff you can do there. And this is basically the one step further, right? So the Microsoft 365 ecosystem as a whole generally covers things like file storage, email, team collaboration. Those are kind of the three main pieces. Azure is one step further, where it's virtualizing and putting all of your systems in the cloud on various levels, right? You don't have to go full virtual machine, but you could put your QuickBooks desktop in the cloud. You could put that practice management tool in the cloud, or a tax preparing tool or a consulting tool in the cloud. And Azure is phenomenal for that. So happy to answer more questions. Feel free to reach out to us if you want more specifics on that. A couple of the things to think about too when it comes to security in Microsoft 365 is really some best practices around utilizing all the tools, because just like with everything, nothing's perfect, right? Microsoft may have a breach down the road, or they may have outages down the road. So how do you back up your information? How do you keep things secure when it comes to all of your data, right? Whether it's Azure, which has probably it's a lot of important data, or whether it's your file storage, right? Which is also, or emails, which also is very sensitive information. So making sure it's secure and compliant. So one thing to do, just as a best practice, this is a best practice to do across your entire organization or any cloud devices or any devices at all, is to have, or any logins, is to have MFA enabled. MFA stands for multi-factor authentication, and it's that annoying text message you get from the bank when you try to log in. And it's really, but it's also super important. That's why every bank uses it now. And that's why a lot of organizations use it, is because it's extremely important to have it. Also, single sign-on is another option for MFA, and is a popular option now for increasing your overall security. MFA is huge. If there's anything, that's kind of the next thing, probably another huge takeaway from this conversation we talked about earlier about file storage, right? About sharing files securely. Another big takeaway here is use MFA. MFA is awesome. And then also a password manager. A password manager can help you implement MFA better and help you keep all of your Microsoft 365 accounts secure, but also all of your accounts secure, is using MFA and a password manager. Super important that your organization does that, and for your own security, sanity, and organization. Another thing too, like I mentioned earlier, is don't share files insecurely, right? Making sure you have that two-way synchronous portal that people can upload documents and download documents, whether it's in OneDrive, whether it's in Citrix ShareFile, whether it's in Google Drive. There's other platforms that can do it. The ones I would recommend, once again, would be OneDrive or Citrix ShareFile. Great tools, and one we have a lot of our clients use. Backup emails and file storage. So another thing to note as well is, this is from a compliance standpoint and a security standpoint, is that Google, Microsoft, all the cloud providers guarantee that they won't lose your information. It's double and triple redundancy backed up, right? Like it's more backed up than probably any of your other systems. That being said, if you were to go delete something, if there's negligent deletion, they can't guarantee that information won't be lost. So that's why it's actually really important to back up your emails and file storage. So backing up your Microsoft 365 entire environment, whether it's your Azure servers, having a backup for that, or whether it's your files or emails, because ultimately if you were to delete something or have some sort of negligent deletion, or an employee accidentally delete something, then it's gone. And after a certain period, Microsoft isn't going to get it back for you. That actually goes for pretty much all the cloud providers. Is instead of, maybe for the past 10 years or so, you've been backing up your workstations or your servers, but now that all our information's in the cloud, even though they back it up, it's still super important to have a backup of it. Number 4 here is monitor for suspicious activity. So this is something we help our clients do. We have different solutions in place to monitor. A quick story here is a couple months ago, one of our senior engineers reached out to me and said, "Hey, Taylor, do you know why someone in Eastern Europe is trying to access your Outlook account online?" And I said, "I have no idea, Kevin, why that's happening." And so he was able to put in additional security measures in place and make sure that the individual wasn't able to access my account. And because of that monitoring, we were able to be preventative and make sure no one was able to access my email account, which is super, super important. So that's also super important as well, is these are things that are going to help you demonstrate compliance, right? If you're in a highly regulated industry, but these are also just best practices when it comes to Microsoft Suite and technology in general. So before we get to the Q&A, because we got a lot of great questions, and please keep your questions coming because we got a lot of them. The future of Microsoft. So like I mentioned earlier, the name's changing. It's going from Office 365 to Microsoft 365. They're going to try to do more endpoint device management. They're going to try to increase more security. They're investing a lot more in security in general and giving you tools. And it's really going to be kind of, their baseline to access their full suite of services. So lots to come. Excited for how it's headed. And like I mentioned, for the vast majority of business clients, especially regulated industries, we found that Microsoft 365 is an awesome platform, and we love the direction they're going in. And once again, nothing's perfect, right? There's gonna be issues with every platform, but if you have a good provider that can help you navigate the platform and how to integrate it with the rest of your organization, that's a huge plus. And actually really how to utilize all the tools, right? Because you may not be utilizing all the tools available, which you're paying for them. And then also you're missing out on productivity and security. So let's jump over to the Q&A section here. We got about 10 minutes before we're wrapping up the event, and love to get to some of these questions here. So first question, how does this compare to Dropbox? So probably in relation to OneDrive and file storage. So Dropbox is a great platform. We have clients that use Dropbox and they love it. Ultimately, it's the main benefit of moving to OneDrive is if you're already paying for Microsoft 365, they include like 1 terabyte of free data for OneDrive. So you could save money on Dropbox if you standardize on Microsoft 365 and just use their free file storage. You're probably already paying for it. If you're already have an email set up with Microsoft 365, you're probably paying for that storage. So that's the real benefit. Another benefit would be that Dropbox is the whole Office suite, like Excel and Word and PowerPoint, aren't native to Dropbox, right? They're not Dropbox's formats. So the synchronous collaboration's a little bit better on from what we've seen on the Microsoft 365 OneDrive. The ability to edit Word documents and Excel documents is better just because it's a Microsoft document. And Dropbox, they have good integrations. Don't get me wrong, and it's a great tool in general. But biggest benefit we've seen people moving away from it to Microsoft is they're probably already paying for it, so they can save money on it. Scott asks, how does 365 integrate with MS archiving? Great question. I don't know specifically around in regards to that, but happy to reach out to us. We can definitely get a specialist to answer it. If that's related to backups, definitely, like I mentioned earlier, Microsoft backs up stuff, but then also you should have your own backup of it. Yes, you will get a copy of the slides and the recording after the event. So look out for that here in the next day or two. Awesome. Let's see. We got a bunch of other questions coming in here. What do we got here? So how would you go about migrating from Microsoft Workspace to 365? Great question, Caitlin. And we do it all the time. We help clients move from Google to Microsoft all the time. There can be some challenges to doing it, but it's not impossible. And it's actually, it's not, since you're already in the cloud, it's less costly than moving from a server to Microsoft 365. I'll put it that way. It's definitely more affordable and easier because your information is in the cloud. But moving your email, moving your files, moving your calendars, moving your collaboration stuff, getting you set up with Teams definitely is some work, but we do it all the time and we can definitely help you do it. So feel free to reach out to us. Awesome. What if you have QuickBooks and do not want the online version of QuickBooks? Oh, great question, Diane. And yes, so you could use Azure to host QuickBooks Desktop and have a cloud server that's hosting QuickBooks Desktop for you. Hope that answers your question. We do it all the time. It can definitely help you and your company host QuickBooks Desktop in the cloud. That way it's easier to access. It's more secure. It's more stable. You don't have to have some server in your office that has that critical point of failure. Nick asks, is there a reason to use Zoom instead of Teams for the webinar? Nick, love the question. Tried to answer that earlier in regards to the webinar features. It is better on Zoom and compared to Teams. And it's a little bit more accessible. So from a marketing standpoint, Zoom is a great tool. If you're working with clients and you're not doing a lot of webinars and things like that, Teams is a phenomenal platform. It can do everything you need. Mark asks, why would you not use SharePoint to collaborate with clients externally? Great question, Mark. And it just seems that OneDrive is more designed for that, and SharePoint's more designed for internal. That's a great question. We should definitely ask Microsoft why they did that. Eventually down the road, I could see them consolidating just because it seems overkill to have both. But as of now, they definitely have both. And SharePoint can do way more than OneDrive. That's the other thing too. SharePoint's this crazy platform that can do all sorts of business automation and built-in programming and things like that. Let's see here. David asks, is it best to add documents to SharePoint first or Teams first? In terms of how documented get access, how do we get documented? Basically, I think he's asking is how can we get access between the two? Where should you start? Great question. I would add everything to SharePoint first and move from there. Tina asked, how well does OneDrive work with PDF documents? Great question. OneDrive works great with any other format of document. It's essentially just a file storage. So you can add documents, any type of document to it. Editing PDFs in OneDrive, I've actually never tried to do that. So I'd still use your Adobe Acrobat or another form of PDF editor. But to store it, to share it, to back it up, OneDrive's awesome for it. Nana's question, what would be the best Microsoft tool to create and have a business operation manual? Great question. I would say SharePoint would be a great tool to do that. And you could store everything in there. James asks, is this going to be recorded? Yes, it is. And you'll get a copy of it later. Let's see here. How do you attach SharePoint document library to a new email in Outlook? So that's the key thing here, is that you actually want to, any external documents should be shared out of OneDrive, and you should just keep everything in SharePoint for internal communication. Next question is, I don't really understand why OneDrive is better for this. I use SharePoint in the same way with links to share with external people. Am I doing something wrong? That's a great question. Yeah, reach out to us. I don't think so. I think you can still use SharePoint for external, but there's some downsides and there's some plus sides to OneDrive. I don't think you can share things as securely in SharePoint, from my understanding. It doesn't have as many features to do it. Another question here is, what do you think of Teams announcements at Microsoft Ignite, especially Mesh? I'm actually familiar with the Mesh, but I'll definitely go look that up. And if you want to reach out to me, maybe I'll have an answer by the time you reach out. And happy, if it's important, definitely happy to run it up the ladder and see if somebody else in our team knows. How do you do external meetings in Teams? Brenda asks. Great question. So you just set up a regular meeting in Teams, and then you can invite people externally to it. Similar to you do in Zoom or any other video conferencing platform. It's really easy to do it. You can actually do it in Outlook, and you can literally just create a Teams meeting in Outlook and also in Teams. Super easy, and that's a great question. Richard asks, what 365 app do you have on your desktop at this time? Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint? I'm using PowerPoint for the presentation, and we're obviously using Zoom for the presentation as well. Jenna asks, you said you still use a traditional VoIP phone system and on Microsoft. We use 8x8 and are interested in switching to Microsoft Option. What is Microsoft Options and why don't you like it? It works, but it's first kind of expensive, Jenna, the Microsoft Voice option, and it doesn't have all the features that you would get with an 8x8 solution or what we help our clients with. If you're not happy with 8x8, I'm happy to help you look at your system and see if in our system to see if it's a better solution for a VoIP solution. But generally speaking, Microsoft's voice solution has not come up to speed to where we'd like, and we're still using a traditional VoIP system. RingCentral is the one caveat to that. RingCentral seems to have some integrations with Teams, and we've helped our clients with RingCentral as well. So happy to talk about that as an option. And we also have another option as well for a great VoIP solution. Chris asks, I'm using OneDrive. What is the main feature of SharePoint that I could be taken advantage of? Great question. And yeah, I'd say it seems to integrate a little bit better with Teams. But that's probably the only one. OneDrive is a great solution as it stands. You don't really need much more than that. Does Teams have a save conversation or does it delete them after a certain period of time the way Slack does? You can set up permissions for when things are deleted. and depending on how long you want things to be stored. David, what would you, we would like some information regarding setting up SharePoint and its features. Awesome, David. Just reach out to us at nwtex.com/Microsoft 365. I'll put it in the chat again, where you can schedule a meeting with us, and happy to talk to you about moving to SharePoint and Teams and Azure. The question is Azure included in the plan? So it depends which plan. They have like, actually, I'll go back to that slide because they have quite a few plans here. Let's see here. Let me go back. They have, I think, 6 or 7 plans in the 365. So as you can see here, they have 7 plans here, or 8 plans here in this area. So it depends on which one you have. And yep, it depends on which one you have. But yeah, some of them included, usually it's a standalone product because it's a server, depending on what you need. Charles asks, are you familiar with real estate closing software known as SoftPro? We continue to use an existing software resident in the computer on each license and of each license use and replace the server. I think he's asking, can we replace it with Microsoft 365 and put it in Microsoft Server? Yes, I'm not familiar with software myself. There may be somebody else on our team that is, but we could potentially put it in the cloud and get rid of that server for you for sure. Nick, awesome. Thanks for sharing that article on the mesh. Definitely take a look at that, and everyone else he shared that in the chat as well. So everyone else is interested in that, they can take a look at that as well. Brent asks, is Microsoft going to allow Teams meetings via Safari browser? Right now, Mac Safari users get error messages. That's a great question. I have not experienced that. I use the downloaded app on my phone and on my computer, and it seems to work great. So I'm unfamiliar with that error message in particular. And eventually I bet they will. Honestly, I'm a Mac user. I also use an iPhone, and so does some other members of our team. Notably, our owner and president is an iPhone user and likes Mac's products. And a lot of our team uses PCs as well. But ultimately, Mac actually plays pretty well with Microsoft and vice versa. They've definitely gotten better over the years. So I imagine they will fix that. Scott asks, I believe, back to the question around archiving files. And yes, you can archive as far as archiving things in Teams, for sure. You can archive stuff. You can also archive folders and create, an archive of a backup of that as well. It looks like we got a couple more minutes to the top of the hour, folks. If you have any last questions, please submit them. How can we use 365 for approval workflow? Great question. And I'm not entirely sure what you're exactly needing. So please reach out to us and I'm happy to answer that and dive deeper into that specific challenge. Kayla says, I can't tell on the spreadsheet what is the plan, is the Azure included in? Let's see here on this particular worksheet. It may be a separate license, honestly. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but I believe it's actually a separate license for Azure. And it would be towards the bottom here. SharePoint server, Windows server. Yeah, it looks like either the E3 is included with it, or it's actually included on a separate license. So not entirely sure exactly where that's included. It's probably a separate license because it's servers and it has all sorts of different other stuff included. And there's all sorts of different features. So Azure means a lot of different things. There's probably 20 different programs within Azure that they provide for different things. So hope this was super helpful. Hope everyone gained a lot about this. Looks like we have one more question. When you said SharePoint would be the best to create a business operation manual, do you mean just to store it as news or as documents or another way? Yes, I would mean to store it. As far as creating some sort of manual that people have to sign off on, then there may be another tool in the ecosystem. Microsoft ecosystem has tons of different stuff. They have a CRM, Dynamics. They have a bunch of other stuff that we didn't hit on. So there may be another process-oriented tool that we could look at. Reach out to us though, and we can talk about the specific use case, what you're trying to accomplish. And hope everyone really enjoyed this. Once again, you'll be receiving an email here in the next couple of days with a copy of the recording and the presentation. And if you would like help with any and all of this, of leveraging Microsoft 365 more fully, please reach out to us. Schedule time with us, nwtext.com/Microsoft 365. The link's in the chat. Hope everything was super helpful. Reach out to us by email or give us a call if you have more questions. Take care, everyone, and thanks for tuning in.